So as organizers, there are several organizers of our event. There is the UBI Lab Arts, the Culture Declares Emergency, UBI Lab Leeds, where I'm from, and UBI Lab Network as an overall organization with several labs participating in the network. We will all introduce these groups. I will speak for UBI Lab Leeds, and for the network, I coordinate UBI Lab Leeds, which is part of the national and international UBI Lab Network with altogether more than 40 labs, either geographical labs or like UBI Lab Arts, specific to a certain topic. Our common goal is the advocacy and achievement of a basic income for everybody. Therefore, we call it universal basic income. And I would like to thank the UBI Lab Network for the financial and organizational support of our event tonight. Our reason to advocate for universal basic income is we experience at the moment an apocalypse in the form of many different crises. And apocalypse means revelation in the Greek language. Our revelation is about an economic and political system which is failing most people, and above all, young and future generations. And what has this revelation to do with basic income? System failure requires system change. The introduction of a basic income in society is part of a system change. Basic income can help to address many problems in our world. A person called Sandhya Anatharahman has put it this way: basic income doesn't solve every problem, but it makes every problem easier to solve. And money is power in our society. Universal basic income would mean money for everybody, and therefore a redistribution of power for the common good. We think that the basic income for the arts pilot scheme in Ireland is an important step in the right political direction. Therefore, UBI Lab Arts, UBI Lab Network, UBI Lab Leeds, and Culture Declares Emergency are very happy to host this event, Basic Income for the Arts in Ireland, What Can We Learn? I now pass on to Mike Pryor from Culture Declares Emergency, who will briefly introduce Culture Declares Emergency, and then I will talk about a few basic income definition and trials which are running in parallel to the actual trial in Ireland. Thank you. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Reinhard. Thanks very much. And yeah, I'm Mike Pryor from Culture Declares Emergency Hub in Kirklees. Nice to see everybody here. We're in West Yorkshire, and I'm also an active member of UBI Lab Leeds. So internationally, Culture Declares has around 1,000 individual declarers, one of those declaration movements, 600 organisations and 10 local hubs like the one here in Kirklees. We're all pledging to tell the truth, take action and seek justice in response to the climate and ecological emergency. One of the galvanising banner statements of our movement is creation is the antidote to despair. But creativity has a wide range of prerequisite basic and psychological needs. In other words, the universal needs of individuals in society. Implementation of universal basic income policy is, I think, a great way to help fulfill these needs and remove precarity as the dominant condition for many aspiring artists. Participation in arts and culture shouldn't just be available for a privileged minority. And we also know that the climate emergency disproportionately affects the poor. From my perspective, there's no audible conversation about basic income yet in our movement, Culture Declares Emergency. So later in this series, we'd like to explore how our movement can deepen and broaden the conversation about basic income and explore the synergies between these two great movements. But that's for the new year. Today's very much about exploring what we can learn from the basic income pilot for the arts in Ireland. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Back to you, Reinhard.
Yeah, I assume that quite a few of you probably already know what a basic income, what it means, but in case you don't, I would like to give you a definition from the Basic Income Earth Network. also called BN, and you can look it up. They have a website and have been around since the 1980s. So first of all, a basic income involves a periodic payment, which is paid at regular intervals, either weekly or monthly. It's not a one-off grant. Second, it's a cash payment. It's paid in sort of an appropriate medium of exchange. It's not some sort of item or food vouchers or other vouchers. So it's cash so that the individual who receives it can choose how to use it. It's individual. It's paid to every individual, not to a household. So every individual gets it, independent whether you live in a household or not. It's universal. It's paid to all without a means test, and it's unconditional. So it's paid without requirement to work or to demonstrate willingness to work or any other condition. Another important factor in the basic income is the financing, which is not part of the definition, but it can be financed through levies, through taxes, closure of tax loopholes or tax exemptions, or a Commonwealth fund. And it's important to understand this because when we talk about basic income trials, in reality, they are all cash transfer trials because none of them can actually, in a trial, actually accept or use all these criteria. They're hardly ever or never universal so that everybody receives it, like in this trial for the artists in Ireland. And also the financing cannot be sort of imitated or simulated in a trial. So these are limitations of any sort of trial. And it's important now to see that trials can just give you some information, but they cannot give you the complete information, which would only come about when everybody receives it. So there are some, as I said, ongoing trials, important trials. One which I would like to mention is the one in Wales. It's a basic income for care leavers, which started in July this year, 2022. And it's for up to 500 young people receiving £1,600 before tax or less 1,280 after tax on a monthly basis for 2 years. And they are sort of, the design of this has been influenced. Another problem that the central UK government is opposed to such trials. And so it had to be designed at a relatively high level so that the care leavers receive an adequate basic income. Another basic income trial is taking place in Marica in Brazil, which is interesting because it's financed through fees from offshore oil extraction, but it's also very interesting because it's a local trial run by a municipality for about 40,000 residents, so about 25% of the local population, and it's implemented through a municipal local bank using digital local currency, so not the national currency in Brazil. Another basic income trial which will start similar to the basic income trial for artists is in Catalonia in Spain, where adult participants will get 800 euros every month and minors receive 300 euros for 2 years. And this will start also in January 2023 with 2 approaches. One will be where individuals will receive it over selected over Catalonia, and then another group 2,500 will receive it in 2 villages in Catalonia and compared with other 2 villages. The important aspect of this is basic income is also assumed to have a community effect when everybody receives it, a positive community effect, but this has hardly ever been tested, and Catalonia will be one of the first ones where this community effect will be tested. There was also a completed Finnish trial, which was run from 2017 to 2018, with 2,000 unemployed, long-term unemployed Finnish people receiving a flat payment of 560 euros every month. The employment during this time only slightly increased in the recipient group, which was the main interest of the conservative government at the time, which started the trial. However, there was significant improvement in well-being, including less financial stress and depression, and it was not affecting work incentives. It was nobody reduced work, but as I said, the increase in work was only slight. And that shows again the interpretation of the same results demonstrates the dilemma of all trials, because the Conservative government then did not want to continue it because there was no big increase in work, even that there was considerable improvement in health and well-being. So in my sort of conclusion, I want to say trials can show us a lot of things and can encourage us to introduce a basic income, but they will not replace the political will and the political pressure from people to introduce it, because all trials can be interpreted in very different ways, and even positive results can, as in the case of the Finnish trial, be interpreted in a negative way and as used as reason not to continue with the approach of a basic income. So that's the end of my part, and I will come back at the end to summarize, but I would like now to pass on to UBI Lab Arts to continue with our session. Thank you. Over to Andy and Toby.
Thank you, Reinhard. Are we going to have a little introduction from Shane around the idea of of what the background on the Irish pilot's been, the basic income for the arts? Would it be all right just to go straight to Shane there?
Yeah, no problem. I'll give a very brief overview just so that there's an understanding. So kind of following on from what Reinhard was speaking about, as different trials are carried out, the basic income pilot in Ireland is also a trial. And so just in case people aren't familiar with it, I'll give a little bit of a kind of an archaeology or background. Like all trials and like all ideas, this could go back like how long is a piece of string, and trying to figure out where the beginning of it was is next to impossible. But there was certainly quite a concerted focus on precariousness of artists' income from about 2010 or 2011 onwards, around the same time as the National Campaign for the Arts started in Ireland, and also Visual Artists Ireland launched a campaign called Ask Has the Artist Been Paid? So these sort of things started to shift a bit of focus governmentally and from a policy point of view onto whether or not artists were living with this high level of precarity. And a big survey that was carried out by Visual Artists Ireland in 2016 showed that more than half of the artists, full-time artists working in Ireland, lived below the poverty line. So this was on a yearly basis. So the precariousness of income was one of the things that was a major concern. Governmentally, I mean, this was always answered, and actually like it has been answered quite well as the years have gone on, but governmentally there was a kind of an ongoing lobby in this direction from about that time up until about 2020, when, and I'm going to actually read from the documentation on the government website here, an Arts and Culture Task Force was established September 2020. And within that task force, one of the recommendations was to try and roll out a pilot basic income scheme for a 3-year period in arts, culture, and audiovisual and live performance and events sectors. So there was a budget allocated, and then there was there were consultations made with arts organisations, Visual Artists Ireland, the Irish Music Rights Organisation, the National Campaign for the Arts, which kind of some of the members sort of moved on to form or found the Praxis Artists Union in Ireland. There were a litany, and then also artists and arts organisations and the Arts Council of Ireland, of course, were all consulted at a governmental level, and then there was a stakeholder agreement met on how this was going to be rolled out, and then there was a public consultation that took place in January 2022 to ask members of the public how they felt that was going to this was going to run, and what their feedback was. So the public consultation received a lot of responses. I can't remember actually what the number is, and I'm not too sure if it is written on here. No, it's not written on here. So I welcome if either the other two artists who are with me know that, then let me know. But otherwise, I'm going to have to just run without a number. But the result of that, I mean, the public consultation, I mention it because it's quite interesting from the perspective of trying to gauge in advance of the scheme being rolled out, trying to gauge how people would feel about it. And there were a lot of questions that were raised on that, such as how would one identify as an artist, and whether or not the division of how the pilot was rolled out should be along lines such as ethnicity or current income or gender or other factors like that. The trial, they decided to give out 2,000 basic income trials. For 3 years, 2,000 people would receive a payment of €350 per week. Each of those would have been, that was drawn through lots, basically. It was a lottery, with maybe some like catches within that, but basically it was a lottery across anybody who applied. There were 10,000 applicants, roughly 10,000 applicants, and roughly 8,000 that were deemed eligible applicants. Then 2,000 people were selected, and then 1,000 people were selected for what they called a control group. So these are people who did not receive the payment, but will answer surveys, will receive a very small payment to answer surveys for the 3 years to show, basically it's working as a control group. So people who get the payment versus people who don't, let's see what the difference is in their lives and what the results of that would be. So this is all being investigated from kind of like a governmentally orchestrated social science point of view. There's not really, I mean, the Arts Council of Ireland are involved in the process, but this isn't something that we as artists necessarily are going to be directly involved in. But we are answering surveys every, I think from my point of view, as a member of the control group, it's once every 6 months. And I think it's more often for those who receive the payment, but we can go into that in a little bit. And that's, it's from those surveys they're going to gauge what the impact of this was. So that's kind of an overview. It was rolled out in September 2022, the final results were announced. And I guess like I'll hand back to Andy, because maybe we'll all have a chance to introduce ourselves and then we can talk a little bit more about that then.
That's great. Thank you very much, Shane. It's really useful to have that overview and start to get the kind of the figures and the numbers in there as well. As kind of, I guess we've discussed when planning this, the idea with these sessions is also to kind of start to just get the human aspect of what's happening. So today's going to be very much about the sort of personal testimonials of the artists that are here. And it's been very useful to have Reinhard's and Mike's introductions there as well to give us the overview. So hopefully we can sort of dig a bit deeper into the human side of the pilot soon. I just wanted to kind of say hello and introduce myself. So I'm Andy. I'm an artist living in Halifax. I'm one of the co-founders of the UBI Lab Arts, along with Toby Lloyd, who's here as well. And actually, I'll pass over to Toby if Toby wants to just do our sort of intro. I've got a little PowerPoint slideshow to go along with that as well. So over to you, Toby.
Great, thanks for the introduction, Andy, and yeah, for everyone else who's on the call. I'll wait till the slideshow is up. So Andy and I founded UBI Lab Arts, I guess in 2020. It was kind of a response to what was happening during the pandemic and the precarious, situation for most of the population, but particularly for artists and people we knew. Andy and I had both been involved in the UBI Lab Network before that. And I know that lots of different labs sort of developed during the pandemic, particularly, I guess, like, this is very nostalgic being on a Zoom call like this. Before there was a lot of this kind of stuff happening during the pandemic, so it's kind of great to be back with everyone again. But let's go back to what the UBI Lab Arts is and what we wanted to do. I guess Andy and I particularly were both artists and both have been making work and doing research about UBI. I'm particularly interested in it. The role that artists play in that and how it would benefit particular artist groups. But what we wanted the UBI Lab Arts particularly to do, I guess it was one of the many non-geographical labs which got set up during the pandemic. But our mission really was to deepen and broaden the conversation about universal basic income and how it would impact different people, not just artists, but we were particularly keen to sort of see how the lab could sort of deepen and broaden the conversation, but not just to sort of in the sense of creating propaganda for UBI, but also kind of creating a space where people could critically reflect on what universal basic income is, and also sort of see it from different creative outcomes and sort of perspectives. Alongside that, we were advocating alongside the labs, sort of sharing resources and seeing how it would benefit the wider society, not just artists. I guess one of the things which we were sort of aware of when we were setting up the lab is about many people who work in the creative industries, whether they're, you know, who defined as arts workers, people who might be working in museums, art galleries, music venues. Quite often they're, you know, they have a creative practice, whether it's a musician or a theatre maker alongside that, and that role in their part-time jobs might be how they fund their other creative work. And we're sort of, I know that during the pandemic there was a kind of the furlough scheme was set up, and that was only for self-employed people. And, you know, acknowledging that a lot of artists are self-employed, but many of us didn't earn enough money. I guess I think it had to be 50% of your income to actually be eligible for the furlough scheme. So I know that I'm drifting off topic here, but yeah, I guess we were just very aware that, you know, the idea, you know, what defines an artist, and, you know, what people sort of you know, accept for those sort of things and what people understand as that is very fluid. And I think this is why it's so interesting that this trial in Ireland is happening. And again, that whole eligibility kind of thing. I know, for example, admin workers might not be eligible for the trial. Okay, so what have we been doing over the course of since we set up in 2020? We've been publishing and sharing info and sort of, you know, creating the creative case for basic income. Alongside that, we've been working in partnership with the other labs to sort of lobby for pilot schemes. And then we've also been doing quarterly creative practice sessions where we kind of share different case studies for how artists advocate for UBI and sort of using creative methods to sort of make the case for basic income or create situations where people can reflect on it and outside of kind of, you know, necessarily political and sort of, you know, cultural sort of scenarios. Okay, so sorry if I've run over. I'll hand it back to Andy and stop rambling.
That's great, Toby. It's always nice to hear the history of it as well. And I think some of those things that you mentioned about, you know, the definitions of artists are going to come up later as well. So it's important for us. And as you say, with the UBI Lab Arts, we started with some of those bigger questions, but really what we've moved towards is this sort of sharing of creative practice that might broaden and deepen the discussion of UBI. So I just want to sort of give you some examples of things that we've been doing or looked at during that. So we've had Sarah Cahead, who sort of did a project called Freeing Your Feet, which she did as a sort of illustration project, gathering stories about what UBI might do for people, how their lives might change through that. Toby's own practice is sort of working with participatory exhibitions and dialogic exhibitions. So again, some of these questions, not necessarily explicitly about universal basic income, but about the idea of work and what you do in your spare time and what you would do if some of your kind of needs were taken care of, brought into a more public sphere. My own works included making a virtual reality video game for Luton called Lutopia, where it was made with the people of Luton to imagine a future version of their town where something like universal basic income would be implemented, and the video game became a bit of a sort of simulation of that. We also heard from Naomi Grenier from the theatre group Cheap Thrills about sort of street theatre performance that they'd done, asking questions about universal basic income. Janie Nichol and Ali Rutherford, who I think might be with us today, did a really interesting project about the role of in-kind support and kind of in-kind free labour within that supports the kind of arts infrastructure in Glasgow in particular, and use that as a jumping off point to start thinking about alternative economies as well. Rona Topaz is an entertainer who sort of talked to us about her practice, but also how her kind of life would be changed or not changed with the universal basic income and the barriers that she faces. We've also had kind of talks from not just individual artists, but from sort of organisations representing artists or that are looking to work with artists, so including Basic Income Network Scotland, Emanuele Braga from the Institute of Radical Imagination, which is a sort of post-capitalist think tank, came to talk to us about the UBI, Arts for UBI manifesto that they'd written. And Gabriella Riccio, also from that think tank, talked about a practical project that they'd done, again, gathering stories about precarious work and how universal basic income might change people's lives, and turning that into a theatre performance. We had a presentation from Basic Income Canada Youth about their Basic Income Bought Me project, which again I think is about sort of ways of putting a case for basic income that maybe gets into the human aspects of this, what basic income might do for people and what it would allow them to, which was, I think, based on the Ontario project, if I'm right. There, Toby, yes, good. And just quickly, we also had a presentation from WOW Basic Income, who are a German group that are looking to create a touring exhibition that, again, creates conversations and spaces for conversation around universal basic income. And towards the last couple of sessions that we did, again, as Toby mentioned, although we were sort of really looking at this idea of artists for universal basic income, we're also aware that artists themselves are part of society and kind of create an interesting case study. So we were looking or talking to artist unions and other sort of unions to sort of begin to dig deeper into this precarious sort of existence, or the nature of precarious labour within art production, particularly, and creative work particularly. So we had a presentation from Alessandro Saviotti from Art Workers Italia, who I think is also with us today, and also from Linda Graham from the Scottish Artists Union. So that's kind of really brought us to this stage where where we've sort of come full circle and are beginning to talk with the other labs. And I'm really happy to be sort of joined by Shane Finan and Botha and Alisha Doody today, to again sort of at this very early stage begin to sort of talk a bit about, well, what's it actually like for artists? What's the kind of human element? What's the personal experiences that are going off when something like a pilot happens? Because it's an incredible opportunity, and I think the world are looking at it, and we were keen to sort of begin this conversation quite early and get things started quite early, just to sort of be able to plot it. So this is the first in the series of hopefully a few quarterly or 3 times a year sort of conversations that we'll have to check in and find out about what's happening. So I just want to remind people that you could put questions in the chat, and if you put a little question mark before them, that will help us to harvest them for later. So whilst the artists, or we have this artist discussion bit, if there's anything that you're thinking about, do put it in there, and then we'll try and gather some of those together, or we'll go straight to you to vocalize your question if that's needed. But if it's okay, I'll sort of pass on straight to Rachel, who's a curator who's joining us from Dublin, to introduce herself. I think what we're going to do is just have a quick round of introductions and a little bit about what the relationship is, the perspective or relationship to the pilot is, and then we'll start to dig into some of these questions as a bit more of a conversation. So I'll pass over to you, Rachel.
Great. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me this evening. So I was one of the lucky people who got the basic income. I'm a curator, and I've been a curator for the past 5 years. I'm an independent curator. So with the way I work is I apply for different exhibition opportunities, or I get invited to work with certain artists or do certain exhibitions. So I've worked in Kilkenny, Dublin, Donegal, and Belfast. And with this kind of work, it's quite precarious. It's once-off projects. They've varied from volunteering in an artist-led organisation, curatorial residencies, mentoring, workshops, a curatorial fellowship. So all very different. And I suppose in particular this year, I just focused on one project. So I didn't want to take on too much, because last year I actually got quite burnt out, because you, at a certain point in your career, you feel like you say yes to everything, because if I don't say yes, when will the next opportunity come along? And I suppose on the back of that burnout this year, I really want to just do one thing and do one thing well. So I applied for the basic income back in May, and then we heard in September. And that was also towards my last payment for that one opportunity. And honestly, it has sustained me, because there has been no other paycheck for the month of November or December. And I suppose on hearing the news that I had received, it was very overwhelming and actually like quite upsetting as well. Just to be handpicked to have won this like artist lottery. And really, I suppose the reason why I applied was just like supplement the poor wages of working in the arts. And just it's like this unquestioned, unconditional stability that has like allowed me to like continue working in this very unstable field. And I also suppose it was my decision to be an independent curator, because it's very in line with my personal values of being very artist-centered, being politically and socially engaged, to be like to pursue self-directed projects. And I've never really found that with any particular institutions or arts organizations. So it was a real gamble for me to like pursue this independent curator work. But I'd also like to see like Alisha and Shane, like why you applied for the basic income and how.
That's great, Rachel. Yeah, thank you. Well, should we pass? Yeah, take that and pass over to Alisha to introduce yourself and why you applied.
Thanks very much, and again, just to echo what Rachel said, thanks for having me as well. I think obviously I'm a visual artist, and I also have a teaching practice. So while I totally resonate with a lot of what Rachel has said in terms of precarity and project-based work and grant applications, and you get some and you don't get more, I think my experience is slightly different, because I was actually turned down initially. So I applied off the back in May because the teaching contracts that I had for the academic year 2021-2022, I was losing one of them because it was a temporary contract for a year. I knew my income levels were going to drop, and I knew I wanted to be focusing on my arts practice. Teaching was always something there to supplement, to help pay between grant applications for things that I needed to do. So I was refused in September. I actually got the letter of notification to say I had been deemed eligible, and I was unfortunately not selected. So I applied for a different teaching post, and I got accepted to that. And then in October, 2 weeks into October, I got another email from the department to say that I had been successful and that 27 places had opened. So it was interesting to me actually to have been refused and then to suddenly have been accepted, because it did make me feel really conflicted, because now I had a teaching job, which I was contracted to complete, and I didn't know if it was going to be fair to accept a position on the basic income scheme when I didn't feel as though I financially needed it. But obviously it's an amazing opportunity. My teaching contract again is temporary. So for me, it felt like in a way a no-brainer, but really conflicting. Because while I can't focus as much time as I would like right now, I do think that there's probably something there for the research of what the department are trying to achieve that states that I can't actually give my practice as much time as I would like. And if I can show that by reducing my teaching hours, I can allocate more time to my arts practice, that perhaps there is something really valuable in having that basic income coming through. So yeah, I had a real conflicting moment when I spoke with the department about it, and obviously, explained my situation to them, and finding out that it was a taxable form of income as well with my situation. That was all real questions, but they put me under a lot of pressure as well. They gave me 2 days to make a decision because they were under pressure in the department to have the 27 places filled, because they couldn't actually keep moving forward with any of it until they had filled all the places, which is why there was a delay. Rachel, you probably noticed that as well. There was a delay to the payments because basically, I suppose some of the people that were deemed eligible, who were selected, were no longer eligible at the time when they were selected, because they had maybe returned into education or had failed to meet some of the criteria because of a change of circumstances. Actually, a lot of people emigrated as well. Somebody in the department told me that a number of the people who lost their places had left the country. So, you know, these are things to consider in it as well. I don't really know if I've answered the question entirely, but I know there's a whole list of questions there, and we can go through them if that helps.
No, that's great, Alisha. It's really good to get again the intro and especially just that, you know, that case for you being someone who was initially turned down and then sort of got the good news afterwards, and starting to get a sense of what the emotions around that is really interesting. It might be good to bring Shane in, because he's already given us the nuts and bolts and the kind of the overview of the pilot scheme. But what's your perspective or relation to the pilot scheme now, Shane, and where are you?
Sure, thanks, Andy. Just also to introduce myself a little bit, which I didn't do earlier because I was just giving the overview of the scheme. I also make visual art, more like Rachel and less like Alisha. My visual art practice is my only form of income, and it's my only practice. So it's extremely precarious. So from 1 month to the next, or from 1 year to the next, I don't know exactly what my income is going to be. I also co-run a collaborative art space in North Leitrim, and I run art projects from time to time. So I kind of have a few different things that I do as part of like trying to chase income, but also trying to make art and make things happen. I applied for that reason, I suppose, within the kind of like that overall idea of precarity. I guess maybe I just thought, okay, it would be nice to have the stability to know that there was an income there, and not always be chasing the next grant or the next project or the next exhibition or whatever that might be. And then I applied, and like a lot of applications that I make for all sorts of things, I forgot all about it and just moved on until the emails came. And actually it was something I think Rachel and Alisha didn't allude to there, but it was initially they said that they were going to have a decision made by, I think it was June or something. And then in June they emailed and said, sorry, it's going to be August. And then in August they emailed and said, sorry, it's going to be September. And it kind of, I think that there was a sort of a point maybe for a lot of people as well, where there was a bit of a waiting around. So maybe Alisha within those 27 people as well, who ended up refusing, they just couldn't wait any longer. I know one person who did actually, or I spoke indirectly to one person who did receive it and then turn it down for their own reasons. But the decision, so I didn't get the payment. I was rejected from getting the payment. I was invited to be part of the control group. So there were 1,000 people put onto a control group. We're given a payment of €650 per year for 3 years to fill out surveys once every, I think it's 6 months, to just track how things are going for those who didn't receive the payment. And yeah, I mean, it was a bit gutting really getting the news. It was a lottery, so I mean it's a bit gutting, but it's not that gutting. It's not like when you apply for like a grant or something and you don't get it, and you feel like there was something wrong with the merit of your own work or something like that. But from a personal point of view, it was a bit gutting, just from the kind of losing the possibility of losing that precarity. And I think the collaborative group that I work with, none of us got it, and we all spoke about it that same day, and we talked about this and how it was that kind of like, oh, damn, you know, there was a moment there, and that moment has now passed by, and it will never be there again. And I guess Alisha got that and then didn't. I mean, that must be really, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I also love to talk a little bit more about what you mentioned about the idea of needing it, and whether or not needing for your own practice overvalues needing because you already have some sort of a safety net with another income. I don't know. I don't know how. I think that this is the point of a basic income, right? Is that it's not about need. Or it is entirely about need, actually, but it's about meeting your own basic needs so that you can actually do what it is that you want to do. But maybe that's something we should discuss. But I would say there was one thing that I kind of mentioned when we started this conversation, and it's something I thought it would be worth bringing up here as well, was my own reaction, and the reaction of my collaborators in the space was actually kind of interesting, because we all ended up landing on the same thing when we started this conversation too. Was rather than saying, oh, like, damn, that was 3 years of safe income and we could have done so many amazing projects and we could have like, blah, 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 like really looking at it from the kind of artist's profession point of view. all of us actually had a different reaction. We immediately went, oh, damn, I can't upgrade my car. I can't, from my point of view, it was actually like, I just have a small health thing. It's not a major thing, but it needs an operation, and an operation means I'm going to be off my feet for 6 weeks, and off my feet for 6 weeks means no driving, and no driving means a lot of income gone and a lot of like work gone. So I have been putting it off and putting it off. And the first thing, this was totally subconscious. I had never thought about this when I applied for this. But the first thought that hit my head when I got that email was, damn, I'm going to have to hold off that operation. And that realization that actually that this precarity is causing me to make decisions about my own health and well-being in that way, it was a real eye-opener. It was actually quite shocking to me. And we spoke about this actually as a group as well, because it kind of made me realize, and made us all realize, that maybe we were living a little bit too close to the line all the time, and maybe we actually need to take care of ourselves a little bit more. And also, a basic income has a massive benefit, obviously, before you even begin to think about it. Well, it was funny that it was a subconscious thing, I thought, as well. So that was kind of, I think when we want to talk about the personal responses, I think I wanted to bring that up because I thought it was kind of an interesting thing to consider. It became not a professional thing so much as a personal thing as soon as the announcement was made. But yeah, I think that's a whole introduction. I don't know which way we want to go about this now, because I kind of feel there were a load of things that were already said.
I can be the thread picker if you like, or just start to try and draw things. But yeah, Shane, thanks for that. Well, thanks to all three of you for and yeah, getting straight into the, as you say, the sort of the individual and the personal responses to this. So I mean, Shane was just starting to talk about that, and I think we can bring it to question for all three of you. But yeah, how has the news, or the kind, now that the pilot's begun, what's the general, or within your circles perhaps, what's the kind of discussion with other people, other artists, but also kind of family? How are people receiving it and talking about it? What's the vibe?
Well, I suppose when the announcement was made, it was quite shocking to receive that email, and then straight away you're going on social media, Twitter, seeing the announcement, because like some people were very like transparent and shared, but there was like a lot of people who didn't share that they had received it. So there was like, oh, who got it, who hasn't got it, do we talk about this, do we not talk about this? And then there's the beginning of like rumblings of, oh, so and so got it and they shouldn't have got it because they come from a privileged background and things like that. So then those conversations start happening, and then like personally for me, I think telling like family in particular, they don't quite understand, or they kind of think, oh, are you struggling? Like, what is that why you apply for this basic income? Are you doing okay? So yeah, I've kind of had to like sit down and explain like, oh no, this is a good thing, we want this for everyone. I don't know, Alisha, what were your experiences?
Yeah, no, it's that conflicting feeling of, am I entitled to this? Because I have a PAYE income, albeit there are a low amount of hours, there's still security in it, and my teacher friends don't get it.
Yeah.
That it's that very much a, do you need that? Jesus, is it that rough? And there is a bit, from, I suppose initially, because I was refused, I saw the social media stuff and I was kind of going, I'm absolutely delighted for everyone that got it, because immediately, like Shane, you think of all of the things you can't do because you didn't. But then to have the few weeks delay and to find out, I did, I don't know, it's still, even now, I don't know, it's still a little unsettled by it, just because of those other reactions, because I don't think it was all rosy across the board in the way that people have responded to it. I don't think there's as much understanding in the trickle down way. It didn't really reach mainstream media in a huge way to explain to people what was happening with it. So the idea of basic income, I don't think, is in that kind of conversation of what people understand is happening with it.
Yeah, I was working with the museum around the time when the first kind of like press announcement came out, and some of the people who were working there asked me, "Oh, so now you and everybody you know is going to suddenly be getting this payment?" It's a misunderstanding that it was a trial not for everybody, but for only for a limited amount of people. So there was like a lot of maybe poorly passed on information rather than like misinformation. And yeah, I mean, I remember I spoke to an artist a few weeks before the announcement, somebody who's like also a professional career artist, and she just said it straight. I'm not telling anybody if I get it. She said there's going to be so much jealousy, there's going to be so much anger about it. I won't tell anybody. And at the time, I thought that was mad because I hadn't considered it at all, the possibility of not telling, because it seemed like this was something that would be kind of beneficial to spread around, and part of the whole idea would be to kind of communicate how this would be. After she said it, it kind of made a lot of sense actually, because it was like, oh yeah, there could be, people could feel like I suppose, I mean, I don't know what they could feel, but they did actually. I mean, whatever it was, there was actually quite a lot of anger or resentment from some quarters after the announcement was made. I find that interesting now you talk about. I don't really do social media much, so I didn't really see the social media reaction. Although I'm kind of curious to know what you're referring to, Rachel and Alisha, when you're saying that, because it sounds like it was kind of divisive-ish, but I don't know what exactly you mean by that.
Do you want to go in there, Rachel? Or?
Well, I suppose I was just reading, like, there's a few people who said, yay, I got it. Thank you. Like, I'm so thankful. And then there's a few people like just sharing the fact that, oh, I'm quite disappointed I didn't receive it. But I think, Alisha, before our meeting, you mentioned that you were on the Catherine Martin.
Yes, the day the original 2,000 people were selected, there was an announcement by the TD that, you know, we're delighted to welcome the 2,000 pilot applicant artists and arts workers that have been selected. And underneath that, there is actually quite a lot of skepticism about the randomized selection, because I suppose people were starting to collect names of artists who had published their identities and said that they got it, and making judgments about their class, their status as artists, and or their experience as artists. You know, were they further into their careers? Did they really need it? Making a lot of these kinds of judgments about those people that had admitted to being selected for it. So I suppose I had read that, and then I found out later, and I was like, oh, I don't really know. What do I do with the information now? Like that other artist that Shane referred to, I was like, geez, do I just keep that to myself then and not talk about it and not tell people? And yeah, it's an interesting one. I think we can share the link to that Twitter a post or whatever if people want to see it, because I think it's good to know, because if you are going to campaign for this, you need to make sure that people understand exactly what it is, particularly in the process of how it runs, and then also, you know, what is the end game for it, because I think there is a lot of misunderstanding in the way that people are making those assessments online.
Just for the kind of predominantly UK-based audience as well, TD Chapter is like a minister in the Irish government, and Catherine Martin was the Minister for Art. Well, whatever the department that art is under, because I don't even know what they call it anymore, to be honest. It's
Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts and Gaeltacht.
And heritage. I think they put heritage in there as
well.
And
heritage, yeah, I thought, yeah, it was engineering at some point a couple of years ago. I've lost it. Like it's. Yeah.
I have shared the link there in the chat. Let's have a look.
Thanks. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, one of the things that's coming up there as well, I mean, not only your own confliction, but yeah, the kind of the general public's kind of response to that really immediately being about need, and kind of like, oh, well, you know, who deserves to get this extra money? And I guess that's one of the underlying concepts that people might find hard to understand about unconditional or universal basic income, that yes, everyone gets it, and then there are, you know, the idea, I suppose, is that there is some taxation in place that means that the people that really don't need it, it comes back into the system and helps other people. But yeah, that idea that it's not means tested in any way is kind of is a key point. But I suppose within this Irish pilot, the lottery was within a controlled group, as Reinhard mentioned earlier on, artists, whether it was kind of self-identified or not. And what sort of criteria did you have to to meet then? Was it to do with the amount of hours that you kind of, or how was that done?
Well, firstly, as a teacher, I was deemed ineligible. So I had to prove my arts career as a complete separate time that I worked, you know. So I had to be able to show my status as an artist that was outside of any teaching hours that I was doing. But I think if I remember rightly, and Shane and Rachel can come in, it was, you know, general kind of ways that you would identify yourself as a professional. So membership of Visual Artists Ireland, or having received government grants or Arts Council support, and publishing of works, exhibitions, and that kind of thing for visual artists. So in much the same way that you would prove it for grants applications, I suppose, was the way that they kind of took it. Is that fair enough, Shane, Rachel?
Yeah, there was a list. It's maybe worth kind of mentioning there as well that the public consultation that happened in before any of the applications went in, asked the public, that was public as in open to any member of the public, not just to artists, to respond with how they would feel it would be okay for people to identify as artists. And from the public consultation, there were a list of ways to prove your artistness. And they were pretty open. I mean, there was a lot. I know, Alisha, like with a second income or with like a position. I think people who were, for example, who had a position in an arts institution, even if they had a practice, say like an arts officer or a member of the Arts Council of Ireland, I'm sorry, a staff member of the Arts Council of Ireland, I don't think were eligible to apply, if I'm not mistaken. So there were there were things that would eliminate, but by and large, to prove that you had an arts career was pretty vague. It could be anything from like having made a sale, or having received funding, or being a member of an organization. They tried to make it, I think, as open as possible. I felt that anyway. I don't know how you both felt. Rachel, maybe you have some more thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. I actually have the list of evidence. So remuneration, which demonstrates payment for your creative work, contract for service, public funding, grant award, received royalties for your work, commissioned to make work, sales of work, existing artists tax exemption. So that's the list of evidence. And also, just to clarify, there's actually 2 streams that you could apply under. So stream 1 was for practicing artists and creative arts workers, and then stream 2 is actually for recently trained applicants. So that means if you graduated in the last 5 years or so, you could apply, and there was only 200 people selected for that stream.
Okay, thanks. I mean, because I suppose, just thinking about Reinhard sort of mentioning also maybe before we started the session, you know, this idea around Joseph Boyce's kind of idea about everyone can be an artist or should be an artist. I guess in these kind of cases, it becomes quite a loophole in the system for people to get involved. I mean, this is a question that I've kind of wanted. I don't think I've mentioned to you before, but I wondered if it's been a discussion so far. Has there been any talk about sort of pooling or sharing the kind of the money that's being received, to kind of address that idea that there's been some people that missed out, or can you redistribute it? Is that allowed as part of the pilot?
Our collaborative group actually spoke a little bit about that, and we said that we probably would have, or at least would have to a certain degree, like covered costs in our space, the space that we run, or something like that. But we didn't know, but we said that we would just hire each other to do other jobs. Like that was we thought we would address that. But no, I haven't heard anybody else talking about that actually, but I'm sure that it probably is going on. I mean, you can't control what people do with their money anyway. So
I think there is internally in Ireland a really strong network of support for other artists and paying each other for work. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you need somebody to write a text for you, you commission them and you pay them for it. And there is already a cyclical kind of network that you can tap into for payment of work and things like that. But I haven't heard anything about any artist that's been selected deciding to pool their resources and do something with it. Not that, you know, I actually don't know a huge amount of other artists. It's lovely to be here with Rachel and Shane. I am sorry that you didn't get selected and you're in the control group. That was a funny moment actually in the application process. It was the amount of, you know, that you had to tick that box and agree, even if I don't get selected, I could be put in a control group and I could be asked to do work that I won't get paid for or reimbursed for. And it was like, I sat on that for a few hours and I was like, will I have time to, because I was close to burnout as well, Rachel, because I was trying to teach a lot so I could pay for things. And, you know, I was also trying to maintain my practice and I was doing residencies and midterms and all that kind of stuff. I kind of sat in that for a couple of hours and I was like, they're asking an awful lot of the control group. Do you know?
But Shane, you're getting reimbursed, are you now for that? Are you?
No, go ahead, Rachel, there, sorry.
Are you getting paid for being in the control group now?
Yeah, it's 650 euros per year for the 3 years. So it's really, it's time to fill out the survey forms, I think is basically what they worked out it is.
The surveys are long, like they're very detailed surveys.
They also ask you to kind of constantly document your time as much as possible and how many hours you spend doing one thing or another. I mean, it's impossible to actually do that week by week, but I've been trying to kind of break that up and do it 1 week every now and again.
Yeah. Well, I think at the time of the application, I don't know, maybe I just looked over it, but it didn't feel very clear that there would be reimbursement for participation in the control group. It felt as though they were asking you to commit to potentially working for free to kind of contribute to the research, which, you know, at the end of the day, I did agree to do that if I was selected for the control group, because I do think that the research needs to be done. And, you know, it was a decision that I made, but I was very conscious of when I was making it. But I thought that's got to be prohibitive for some people to kind of tick that box and then say, am I going to be able to do that? Knowing that, you know, that potentially that this survey could take an hour or less or more, you didn't know.
Yeah, it's a touch. I mean, it's kind of like a touch, kind of insult to injury, not getting it and then being asked to do work to kind of prove the like. But as a friend of mine said, like, you know, what you should do is answer the survey and just document. And that week, if I had 350 euros more, I would have been this much better. And that week, I could have done this if I had 350 euros more, and be like quite specific. But it's not really
down all these opportunities because I didn't have the money to follow them.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, it's asked huge questions, and I think this is something that we haven't talked about, that I have talked about within colleagues of art and who are artists, and it's maybe of interest to the people who are here who are artists as well. It's asked huge questions about also like where the lack of precarity can lead in the kind of meritocratic system of the arts. So like what I mean by that is, if you have 2,000 people who are now kind of don't have to chase funding all the time, can they make better art over that course of time because they just simply have the space and time to do it? And when they do so, will they apply for things and win more of the grants as well? And this was something that kind of like also came up in a conversation, is like when you do get, like, is it kind of like a double reward also getting it, like, because it'll make your career much easier in theory. Of course, that's also something that they just want to prove, and this is something that will probably come out of the results of that. But I wonder, like, if you have any thoughts on that as well, because like I'm kind of particularly thinking of your position, Alisha, because you could potentially not teach for a while now, which is quite nice. But that also changes maybe the way that you'd approach new projects. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, there's it feels really difficult to kind of address where my head's at with it, because, you know, there's something really valuable about the teaching practice that I do, for the fact that it isn't my arts practice, and it gives me a space away from my arts practice to mold things over and to consider it. And the full-time approach to my arts practice is quite an intimidating thing, actually. What do you do every day and that kind of stuff? But you know what? I don't know. I actually don't know. I think the eligibility criteria in itself has done a lot of that kind of, because you had to be able to prove your arts career, because you had to be able to prove that you're, you know, already in receipt of funding or commissions and all of that kind of stuff. I think it has already pulled a lot of those people in, you know, that you already are kind of on that track to be able to produce that kind of work. So I'm not sure. It probably will prove that, because if that's what they wanted to prove, it's going to be, they're going to be able to prove it in that sense. But I'm not sure. I think, you know, that they did that early days, not necessarily through the survey. Do you know what I mean?
That's a good point.
And I just wanted to pick up, Shane, that you also said, yeah, you think one of the aims of the pilot is to show that essentially better art will come from reducing precarity for artists. You think that's the kind of that's
I don't know that that was ever explicitly stated, but I kind of get the feeling that that's maybe one of the hopes. Yeah.
that would be sort of more like the the governmental idea of feeding the creative industries and sort of seeing some return on it. I mean, this is another kind of conversation that we can bring in at some point, is looking at those countries or places where there is very substantial arts funding for artists to survive, and what the kind of cultural output of those places are. Because I mean, it's interesting that certainly I think between the three of you, we've all got what you either describe as a community focused or a socially engaged or a publicly intervening kind of, that's really about working with people. And yes, is the idea of just having a income taken care of mean that there's less pressure to sort of do that work with people, or does it allow you to work with more people? I wonder whether the autonomous art kind of way of working might sort of raise its head again in a place where people don't necessarily have to be chasing funding in that way, or whether that's been a kind of conversation or a thought between kind of the three of you.
I think it definitely lends itself to be more experimental in your work and not so reliant on say like applying for funding, waiting to hear if you got the funding, then starting the project. Like if I want to start a project that needs to happen right here, right now, I can kind of dip into that income in hope that I will get that funding down the line, if it's promising. Like that hasn't happened yet, but I hope it'll happen in 2023, that if like something that is very responsive to a cause or like something like that, that is also where that will come into. Yeah.
I think having that time, where, like in my situation, that you're not working so many hours every week that you kind of have to consider, can I start this now? And then putting things on the long finger and hoping that it'll still be relevant later, particularly with communities and communities of interest. I'm hoping to travel to work on a wider project, or to carry it into further communities that are a little bit further afield, and that kind of travel wouldn't be possible for me if it weren't for something like this basic income, because I wouldn't be able to afford to be able to do that. And so it's giving me an opportunity to actually bring my work into a wider context and kind of consider that. So I think Rachel's right. You can be experimental, and then you're doing it in a way that you're more comfortable doing it. It doesn't feel as precarious or risky. You can kind of push your own boundaries a little bit more to kind of consider your practice in it through a wider lens, I suppose.
Nice. I'm just kind of aware that we might just have sort of like 5 minutes more of this sort of internal discussion. Then we're going to start addressing some of the questions that have been coming through the chat. But you kind of already touching on areas of this. But I just wondered about if there are any more sort of reflections that you have about the strengths and the weaknesses of the pilot specifically. I think, well, just relating it back to a question that I've seen in the chat there about how some people might have been put off for applying, artists with disabilities might have been put off for applying because of the effect on benefits. Is that something that you've kind of been aware of?
No, definitely. It will affect your disability allowance, your invalid pension, your blind pension, your medical card. All of those social welfare payments will be means tested in regards to your basic income.
Okay, so I mean that's kind of created a situation where the kind of the money that you're getting could conflict with other sort of either benefits or support that you're entitled to receive, and reduce that. So dependent. So this is again something that's kind of come up in previous UBI Lab discussions around the idea of kind of a basic income plus, or how it starts to be seen as a package that compares with or adds on to other support and infrastructural support as well.
It might be worth, can I mention something there as well, Andy? It might be just worth mentioning that you had to be, tax compliant and register with revenue, and you had to be all of those things. There are so many artists that are not doing those things because they can't afford to. And so that there's a whole chunk of artists that I know that didn't apply because they aren't registered as self-employed, and they get so little money every year that it probably doesn't feel worth registering, and so they were ineligible to apply for this because they wouldn't be technically tax compliant, you know what I mean?
And broader than that, I think that there's also quite a strong mistrust of institutions in general anyway, related to that same idea. But like, I think both from an arts community and from the kind of like the unstable, precarious income communities, like to put yourself forward could also be seen as putting yourself in the firing line a little bit. And I think I also knew people who wouldn't apply for that reason too. Yeah.
Actually, Praxis, the Irish Artists Union, brought out a really good statement about the oversight on disability supports with regards to this. So I've just popped the link in the chat there.
That's great. Thank you, Rachel. Cheers for that. So just before we start, just we go and start gathering some of the questions from the chat, I wanted to just add in put the one that we'd thought you might want to discuss together as a panel is what about artists? How might you see artists, or what do you think artists can do to promote the idea of a universal basic income, not just for artists, but beyond?
Sorry, Andy, could you just ask that again really quickly, please?
Yeah, how do you think artists might be able to promote the idea of universal basic income outside of just the artist community?
There was it's an interesting point. I suppose just to jump back to one of the things that I said when just doing the introduction to this, one of the reasons artists were selected as opposed to other groups in Ireland was because of the precarity of income. Many other sectors wouldn't have, or at least wouldn't be perceived to have, as much precarious income. Although, like, we all know that like no job is necessarily a secure job, and things change very rapidly. Or can change very rapidly in economics or in different industries. So, but anyway, that's the decision that was made. But I do think that it's kind of possibly one of the things that wasn't overly considered, but certainly one of the things that I would feel very strongly about is that one of the things that art does in general is generate or spread or reconsider ideas. And present those publicly. So the income itself going to artists could also bring forward the idea of a UBI full stop, or at least the idea of shifting the way that we think about work, or money, or reward, or struggles, and the idea of entitlement as a word that was used earlier on. I was actually quite taken when Rachel said that earlier about like the idea that you can be immediate. It's so true, like that you're always chasing the project for next year, or you're chasing the project for 3 months down the line, or 6 months down the line, or whatever. And the idea of being immediate and being able to respond or react immediately because you know that there's a little bit of a safety net is really exciting, actually, because like exciting as in exciting to see what art is going to come from the next couple of years of artists who have that income, and see actually what comes out of that. And I think, I don't know from a broader public point of view how that spreads out, but I know certainly from the point of view of somebody who is both works in this industry and also, or if you want to call it an industry, works as an artist and also like appreciates and enjoys art, like I'm very excited to see myself what comes of that. Like I think that it's there's something quite dynamic or amazing could happen.
Nice. And Rachel or Alisha, any thoughts on the idea of artists, or how artists might promote the idea of basic income more generally?
I'm thinking of something Shane said, when you got the news and you went, oh, I can't have that surgery, or I can't do that thing, that every single time I can do something because I have the income to be like, this is because I had the artist basic income. this is because I had a
Yeah.
basic income, you know, because there are so many things that we don't do because we don't have that security to be able to just even publicly acknowledge the basic things. Like, I got my teeth cleaned. Isn't that amazing? I wouldn't have been able to pay for that if it wasn't for the basic income coming through, because that is what it's for. You know, it's there to provide for your basic needs. And Shane, I really needed that wake-up call, because I think I've put an awful lot of things on the long finger as well, and thought, you know, I have to take all the jobs, I have to say yes to this, I have to say yes to that, because you don't know when the next thing is coming. And I think there's a psychology there that I'm looking forward to unpicking, to be honest with you, over the next couple of months, because even that really unsettled feeling that I'm still carrying about finding out that I was, you know, really, really lucky. Why do I feel so uncomfortable about accepting that kind of basic income? Why don't I feel like that's an okay thing? You know what I mean? There's a lot of psychology there to be unpicked, but I think, yeah, we can just acknowledge the really strategic, basic things that we should be allowed to say that, you know, I did that because I had a little bit of money coming in every week.
Yeah, I think it's going to be those personal experiences, those testimonies, and also being invited to speak on these sort of panel discussions as well, because this is a step in the right direction. Like, we have a basic income for artists, but overall we do want a basic income for everyone. At least it's starting the conversation.
Nice, that's great. I'm gonna sort of just start to pull out a couple of the questions from the chat, and I don't know, maybe Toby might also have a couple of questions to put to you from there as well. But just because the conversation's going in that direction, Craig Bergold from the Ontario Basic Income Network has just asked about what the role of artists in the final report might be. So you've kind of what you were saying there, Rachel, about the sort of testimonials, I guess, and even from the control group. So you're being asked to kind of bring those conversations in. But will a follow-up question there, I suppose, also, will the artists review the control group, or will the artists be involved in that evaluation other than just providing the case studies or the testimonials? Do you know what the outcome will be?
I don't think we'll be I think we just send off our surveys and they'll do all the reporting and the evaluating. I don't think we're in the room for that.
I assume that some of the lobby groups, members of Praxis, perhaps VAI, Arts Council of Ireland, would probably be all right. Like, but I think it's just surveys coming back from the artists. The surveys are kind of, I don't know if Alisha and Rachel have you both done a sample one already? There was an internet show one sent out to kind of give you an idea of, and it was kind of, I mean, it was interesting, it was broad. I'm not a social scientist, so I don't really know what the aim of some of the questions were, and you just kind of answered them as honestly and truthfully as you can. But I did find myself writing quite a lot in the any other points box at the very, very end of it. So it did feel like maybe a lot of the things that were being thought weren't being addressed in the survey, maybe by the time I got to the end of it.
Okay, thanks, Shane. I'm going to pass over to Toby. Have you been able to sort of collate any of the questions, or would you like to sort of invite some of the audience to talk through? I've got to just quickly nip off for 30 seconds. So.
So I realised I was not muted there. I guess one of the things which just one of the, just coming back to what you were all saying about the kind of things you could do because you've got this basic income. And I think, an important point to say is that it would enable you to say no to a lot of things as well. I know as an artist, the kind of jobs I've had to do, you might do that one because it pays better, or, you end up doing that work because it will pay for the short-term thing. You've got to get, you've got a health thing, or you've got to pay the fix the car. So you end up doing that thing, which means we have to say a no to the more, the productive things, or the things which, you actually really care about, or the things which might build a longer term sort of thing. And it's that kind of balancing between those things and what my friend refers to as hope labor, the kind of work you do for free, which might enable sort of stuff further down the line. But to, going back to that, someone's asked whether the UBI would be enough to live on. I don't know, you said it's 350 euros per week. I know, like, when I've spoken to artist friends of mine in the UK, a lot of people say, wow, that's so much money. And I know that it is, you know, in the grander scheme of basic income trials, it's quite a generous one. But I mean, in Ireland, you know, I've got friends who are Irish and said, like, you know, it wouldn't act, you know, it's so much, the cost of living is so much higher than in the UK. Can you sort of speak to that and sort of tell us, like, actually, is it enough to live off? And I mean, someone else has asked whether the basic income is in line with the minimum wage. I mean, I know that different trials have different things, but, you know, can you sort of say anything to that?
So once again, Praxis, the Artists Trade Union, also gave a response to this, and I'm just going to quote. We note research from the Living Wage Ireland that the basic living costs of living in Ireland for an adult without dependents are between 383.60 and 519 euro a week. And I can send a link of that. But yeah, we received 325 euros. So really, it's not a basic income, it's supplementary, it's partial. Yeah, and I think Praxis was doing part of a working group and in consultation quite a lot to kind of maybe ask to rephrase basic income, and that it's contributing, it's not, and supplementary, it's not like yeah.
And just to, you know, say that it is kind of a, how long is a piece of string as well. It very much depends on whereabouts you're situated on the island as well, because, you know, 325 euros a week in Dublin is definitely not going to go as far as it might in North Leitrim, for example. You know.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair enough. And I know, I mean, just from the art networks which I'm involved in, again, it's that kind of thing of, it depends on who's enabled, you know, what kind of privilege you might already have. Like if someone's got a partner who has got a large income which they can survive off, or, you know, which enables them to take the time out to invest in their practice and things like that. So it is, yeah, it's like you said, it's how long's a piece of string. I guess in terms of the point about Craig's point about artists being involved in the final report, I mean, I think even if you're not involved as much as we'd like, I think it's really great that we've started this process of you know, providing the platform to have these discussions, because I think it's really important that the human narratives, or how it affects, like, yeah, like you said, the day-to-day things, like just being able to have your teeth cleaned, which might seem insignificant or might seem like a luxury to a lot of people. Actually, these sort of things do impact on the wider you know, well-being, and like you said, you know, Shane, sort of putting things off, isn't it? It's like, and how that accumulates over time. I mean, I know that yeah, like me and my friends have got very similar scenarios on how, yes, I'm putting things off. I'm in danger of rambling at this point, so I think I'm not sure if we've got, I mean, I think we've covered most of the questions which have been raised so far, but I might be wrong. Andy or Johnny, is there anything else, or is there anything pressing from the audience which they'd like to raise or address to any of the questions?
I think Reinhard had a question, and we've also got Alison as well. He's got a hand up as well, but go to Reinhard first.
Yeah, my question, I put it in the chat, is, I mean, there are obviously these requirements of a scientific or academic trial with randomization and control group, but the public may not really understand, or other artists may not really understand what this means and why it is done. So I just wanted to ask the question to the three artists. Do you think people have understood why it is done, and that it's necessary if you want to have a basic income trial to do it in this way? Or is there a lot of confusion about it? Thank you.
I think it depends on who you ask. There definitely some people I think within my own network of colleagues and friends who are artists, some people would have read into and been quite up to date with the things that were coming out from the likes of VAI or Praxis, and stayed quite on the money on that and followed the public consultation and so on, and probably then had quite a good understanding, whereas some people got involved at the point where it was just apply and didn't really follow that conversation, and I think had like maybe less understanding of the reasons behind these things. But I mean, I didn't even have a great understanding of basic income until starting the conversation with some of you in advance of this meeting, as in like UBI and UBI trials and so on, even though I did stay up to date with what was happening with the artist one in Ireland. So I guess these are all kind of like logic gaps that maybe people will seek out as well, or at least I'd see it that way to a certain degree.
Nice one, thank you, Shane. And Alison, would you like to vocalise your question?
Yeah, I put in the chat that quite a bit of being involved in the trial didn't sound anything like UBI, because it all felt very conditional. And I do realise that, you know, that's what that I mean, we're trying to think of it, you know, putting together a trial in Manchester. So it's how a trial or a pilot actually is representative of what we all want, which is a proper universal basic income. And I just wonder what the pressures were of thinking, well, if I've taken this, I better do some good work, hadn't I? I better create something marvellous, or, you know, and having to go through the hoops for it. I just wondered how you feel it might be different if you just got it like everybody else got it, and it was just there. It just was. It was yours. Didn't have to, you know, dance for your supper sort of thing. You just had it. Thank you.
But am I right in thinking that there's no pressure to have an outcome from the money? No, it was more it was about the selection, was the criteria, but you don't have to produce anything.
No, there's no expectation placed on you by being a recipient of the scheme, but I think there is a psychological kind of aspect to it. And Rachel, I love your approach to being like, you know what, I was nearly burnt out and I'm deciding now to take a step away and to put my focus majorly into one thing, and see what comes out of that, and saying no to things. But I suppose because it was because there was a selection process, and because, you know, I don't know, there's something interesting in the psychology of it, Alison, to be honest with you, that, you know, needs to be unpicked a little bit more around, yeah, what do I have something to prove, or do I have to, yeah, how do I make it worth it? How do I make it so that the government can read this and say, totally worth giving her the money, and it is something that we should consider doing for everyone. That the way that played out in those 3 years of that artist's experience make it so that this is something that everybody should have in theirs. Do you know what I mean? Like that, there is something in that. I think that's there. It feels weighted.
Yeah, and like Shane, I know you mentioned that consultation survey back in January. I remember one of the questions was, how do you make this career economically viable? And I was like, it's not. and like, it's not going to be with the basic income either. Like,
yeah, I mean, that was part of what I was saying about the survey as well that I answered. I felt like that survey could have been answered much easier by somebody who worked in the civil service than somebody who works in a very precarious income. And that was kind of the point that I was getting at. And I also, I mean, Alison, I agree. I would kind of like in some defense of the scheme, they did announce quite early that this was not a UBI, and they continuously repeated, everybody who was involved in it continuously repeated, this is not a UBI. This was a basic income pilot scheme, and that the idea behind the pilot was to take a small subsection of the country and give them a basic income in order to see how that would affect things. I don't know what I mean, it's, yeah, I suppose this is the you have to stand back sometimes and allow these things to run. I don't know what the benefit of those things can be. And I guess this is more what Reinhard was speaking to or about at the beginning, when there are these different pilots being run in different countries with different people and different groups. The basic income pilot in Ireland is for artists is a scheme, and it's an attempt to see whether or not something will work, and who knows what can come out of that. I did talk to a very close friend and an artist who actually got the basic income, but we were speaking long before. I don't think it was before they even had the application process yet. And he just made the point that it would just be really interesting to see what will happen if you just give 2,000 people that. And it was that, or it was nobody. So you kind of go, okay, well, it's either nobody or 2,000 people. So it's something, I don't know. It's not universal though. It's certainly not universal basic income. That's not what it is at all.
Okay. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Alisha. It's been really interesting to hear you there. I'm going to sort of pass over because I think we've just got 3 minutes more, and we did want to create a little space for, is it Anne Ryan, to introduce just for a minute, just to say hello about, because we're leading into this discussion about the wider frame for the pilot. So a minute for you, Anne.
Somebody needs to unmute her. And you cannot hear you. Let me see whether I can.
I've got it now. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I couldn't unmute myself there a minute ago. Thank you very much. I won't keep you too long. Just thanks to the organisers for giving me this minute to speak. I'm from Basic Income Ireland, so we're the body that advocates for Basic Income Ireland, for a basic income in Ireland, the universal, unconditional, sufficient kind for everyone. We're delighted that the artist scheme is kind of keeping this in the conversation, and we'd really love to kind of collaborate with some of the artists. We've been a bit low on energy in the last few months since the pilot scheme with the artists started, so we haven't made that much contact. So really congratulations to the organisers tonight for getting us together. So we'd love to get in touch with artists to talk about how we could broaden the conversation, how we could keep it going in Ireland about bringing in a basic income for everyone, because there is precarity in many sectors, like as Shane said, and the health benefits are huge. A universal basic income would overcome all those problems that you alluded to for people with disabilities, because the way we have worked it out that it could be funded is that there would be the basic income, and then there would be top-ups for people with additional needs. It would always be tax-free. And so literally what you do is rich people, poor people, everyone would get it, but the means testing is shifted from the social welfare office to the tax office. So at the end of your income period, you pay an appropriate amount of tax, but not at the start. We really believe that it's a system intervention with very high leverage. You know, it's not a magic wand, but it would have application across many, many sectors. And importantly too, we take the view that it's just part of a social wage. It's not a replacement for really good public services free at the point of use. And I think that's really important to emphasize here tonight. Plus, it would unleash everyone's talents and creativities. No one would have to prove what they are. The kind of the creativity of the ordinary citizen could be unleashed, and just the psychological thing that Alisha talked about, or that was talked about by the 3 contributors, of, you know, who's got it? Do you know someone who's got it? Should I tell people? If it's universal, everybody has it. You know your neighbor has it, whatever their circumstances are. So everyone's dignity is intact. So we'd love to communicate with you. We're at basicincomeIreland.ie. Please get in touch if you feel you have the energy to do that. We'd love to see you. And again, thanks to Reinhard for the contact and the organisers for giving me that minute.
Thank you, Anne. And yeah, I think, as you know, this is good. Well, I'll pass on to Rag, so he'll explain what the follow-up steps are. But yes, thanks for the contribution there.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank Anne for her excellent summary of the issues, because it helps me so I don't need to summarize it again, because she has already done it in a very effective way. I also want to thank all the people who facilitated and all the people who participated, all for the interesting questions and comments, and for the facilitation, and especially obviously our 3 Irish artists for your excellent contributions. This is really deserves a big clap, and unfortunately I can clap, but everybody can. I mean, I can also symbolically do it. And I didn't say in the beginning, I'm a retired public health academic, and I've read lots of articles about basic income and basic income trials. And I was fascinated to listen to this conversation because it repeated all the sort of key issues, the reasons why one should really support a basic income for everybody, but also the issues, the problems of a trial. Because, I mean, some people say, shall we just forget about trials and just introduce it for everybody? And others say, no, we need to test in order to prove that it is really effective, which I think I'm convinced it will be. But once you start with trials, you end up with all these questions. So if you have a trial for a specific group, scientifically, you need to define who are artists. You can't just say, oh, we just chose everybody, because then some academics will say this is not a proper trial, it's useless and cannot prove anything. I mean, we had a very successful trial in Namibia where a village was receiving a basic income and really health improved, economic activities improved, violence reduced. So it was a huge positive trial, but there was no control group. So immediately it was torn apart and it was said the trial is useless because there was no control group. And that's why I asked earlier on, how much does the public and even the artists understand this sort of, as I said, I'm a public health academic, I look at these sort of things, why randomization, so that anybody has the potential, and people may say, oh, why does this person get it? He doesn't really, or she doesn't really need it, and so on. And and this person doesn't get it, but he really or she needs it. So obviously the public understanding of this concept of having a sort of randomized trial with control group may not be there and may even create confusion. But then on the other hand, I mean, you mentioned all the other aspects, like when I read a trial in Lesotho about the jealousy of people who didn't receive it. And obviously, if everybody receives it, there is no negative effect. But if you have certain people receive it and others, then you create jealousy and people get frustrated why some get it and others do not get it. So there was lots, but also the agency looking after your health, what you mentioned in your sort of discussion, how you can sort of avoid burnouts and health improves, which is a particular interest of mine, because as I said, I'm from public health, I'm a medical doctor. So I think this was a very good discussion, and really it summarized a lot of these issues, which I think it's sort of summarized 50 or 100 papers I have read about it in 1 hour or 1 hour and a half discussion. So thanks a lot. And I want to say to everybody, we will follow up. We will like to invite the artists again in 6 months on the 7th of June 2023. That is at the moment the date planned, to come again and to discuss their experience after 6 months of being either in the control group or being the recipients of basic income. So we can sort of have some real picture about the evolution of this trial, about the strengths, but also of the weaknesses. And so we can learn how useful these trials are and what they tell us about a basic income. But I mean, as I said, I'm basically convinced that the basic income is a good thing and is important for everybody, and also as a basic floor which cannot be reduced. That was also a part of the discussion. Some people said, but then here you may lose something. A real basic income should be something, a floor under which nobody should be sort of falling or go below, so that people can realize that this income is always there for them, to give them agency and to give them a certain certainty about their that their basic needs are covered. So I don't want to, I could continue forever, because as I said, this was such a rich discussion. I want to stop here because I'm already 5 minutes overdue. And again, thanks to everybody, and I hope we see you all again in 6 months' time. Thanks to the facilitators, thanks to the audience, thanks to the artists in particular. And have a good evening and a good weekend, and all the best for the ones who receive the basic income, and all the best for the one who is in the control group. Shane, thanks a lot. All bye and good night, and see you again in 6 months' time. Bye-bye.